Welcome everyone to what is going to be our last session, really, of this whole course, which essentially has been the study of journey without goal. Chögyam Trungpa's really magnificent work introducing the fundamental perspectives of Vajrayana practice, not just from a purely theoretical point of view, but very much from an experiential, intuitive point of view that really reflects Trungpa Rinpoche's great realization in terms of the experience in terms of the path, and great realization of freedom and the tremendous perspective that comes from that, and also the language of the modern world, where Trungpa Rinpoche is absolutely unique and has really been an inspiration for so many other Asian teachers of Buddhism. So this presentation of Vajrayana, Journey Without Goal, is unparalleled. And this last essay that we looked at, the Sacred Outlook, the practice of Vajrayogini, and which was originally published, I think, as the Vajrayogini Shrine, is also such a masterful summary of the Vajrayana practice, of the Vajrayana method, and particularly how it gels with the foundational perspectives of the Buddhist path. Moreover, also how really describing it in terms of its actual foundation, in terms of its practice, and also how it's transmitted, how it comes down to us. And all along, continually relating this to the experience of the modern person. So it's really always a privilege to be presenting this. And of course, I think all of you know, this comes with a strong disclaimer. When you're presenting this material, or rather when I'm presenting this material, my entire objective is really just to bring persons to read Trungpa Rinpoche's works, and they very often will, you could say, speak for themselves. And the kind of unpacking and embellishments and interpretations that I come with, you should be very aware this comes from an ordinary confused individual's perspective. Someone who definitely has incredible awe and respect for Trungpa Rinpoche and for the subject matter, and that is what you could say justifies me doing this. But at the same time, rely on this being between you and the author Trungpa Rinpoche. Supplicate Trungpa Rinpoche. We would say Trungpa Rinpoche does not abide externally. Trungpa Rinpoche is the Dharmakaya, and there shouldn't be any sense of just other than just you and Trungpa Rinpoche and the teaching and your practice, of course, wherever that might be. So so we are presently then in the section that well, really all we have now is just sort of wrapping it up. But then I thought this session we could have question and answers, because this would inevitably prompt a lot of questions. And yeah, I know sometimes questions, they come in a little bit slow, but once they pick up, then there's very easily there's sort of quite a few questions that arise. So I think it's okay that we sort of allocate a fair bit of time for that. So let's I'll just go through the last section here of this essay. So actually, I'm tempted, since just because the page is sitting there, right? I'm sort of drawn to just what it says at the top of the page here, and I'll just read that. This is really just from the previous section, but it's it looks very beautiful. I'm very tempted to read it. So it says, the bliss of Mahamudra is not so much great pleasure, but it is the experience of tremendous spaciousness, freedom from imprisonment, which comes from seeing through the duality of existence and realizing the essence of truth, the essence of space, that it is available on this very spot. The freedom of Mahamudra is measureless, unspeakable, fathomless. Such fathomless space and complete freedom produce tremendous joy. This type of joy is not conditioned by even the experience of freedom itself. It is self-born, innate. So just a few thoughts on that. When we say seeing through the duality of existence, this is what we're doing from the very start on the path when we're practicing meditation. Of course, also when we're studying the teaching and beginning to understand the hoax and the deception and the confusion that we're subject to, it's then on the basis of allowing the mind to reconnect with reality that it's by simply the simplicity of meditation that we begin to see through, not in the sense of like making a discovery, but just shaking off this unnecessary worry and the unnecessary constructions, beliefs in this dualistic notion, self and other. And the entire, you could say, get up of conceptual constructs, just settling into simplicity. That's where we're at. And when we're then talking about the entire Vajrayana path, which sometimes at a glance, at a glance and very often in praxis, appears to be complex, we need to understand that what we are engaging with, the countless methods of Vajrayana, are simply the skillful means. Yesterday, Tongsa Khyentse Rinpoche was teaching on bodhicitta, and in there he speaks about how the way that we engage the notion of compassion for others and so forth, all of this is skillful means. The absolute bodhicitta lies beyond good and bad, beyond conceptual constructs of any kind. But we need the path, and we need something that engages our conceptual dualistic mind. And that's where we don't just sort of leave it at, it's only when you're in meditation that you're free of duality. We actually are, with all the various methods, and that's a point that Tongsa Khyentse Rinpoche also was making, all the methods of the Buddhist teaching is working at this artificial construct of a self and other, this and that. And so all the yoga that we have in Vajrayana, particularly the profound yoga of engaging our body, speech, and mind, not in the ordinarily karmically constructed manner, but engaging our body, speech, and mind according to its true, unconfused, genuine nature. This is something that we very often see, and I was just listening to a little bit with a guy called, an Irish poet and philosopher called John Donahue, who was basically talking about, he was highlighting how Meister Eckhart, he speaks about how in the midst of all our conceptuality and our confusion and so on, there lies this core which is untainted by anything, basically what we refer to as Buddha nature. And that core that we possess in the Buddhist tradition, this permeates all aspects of our being, our body, our speech, and our mind. And so integrating that through the methods of Vajrayana is an incredibly direct way of carrying the very essence of who we are in all situations. So it's such a travesty when we think of Vajrayana in terms of just the outer appearances of ritual. The rituals are ways, it's a way of yoga, of engaging with the universe. It's engaging with our being. It's engaging us. But the core of that practice, what that expresses, is this Mahamudra or this Vipassana, this spontaneously present quality of enlightenment as it permeates our body, speech, and mind. So integrating that is then continually, not just in meditation, but continually throughout all aspects of our psychological universe, our physical universe, our social universe, and so on, is engaging this, what Trungpa Rinpoche talks about here, the unspeakable, the fathomless, this space. And this produces joy. If you look at the picture to your left, this is the this is the end result. This is, as we all know, this is Jigme Khyentse Wurzel, Tashi Paljor, Mangala Sri Bhuti, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and Rinpoche and say the whole lineage that Rinpoche carries and the lineage that Rinpoche has perpetuated, and also which was the lineage of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, is the hallmark of that, is this underlying deep trust in our humanity and this joy, not as something that's achieved, but something that is unveiled as innate. Okay. Okay, so anyway, so Trungpa Rinpoche here says, conclusion. Some of what has been discussed here may be very difficult to grasp. In fact, it should be that way. If it were possible to experience the Vajrayana simply by reading about it, it would cease to exist because no one would practice it. Everyone would simply study the texts. Luckily, this does not work. The only way to gain the Vajra freedom is to practice Buddha Dharma as it was taught by the Buddha and as it has been preserved and passed down for 2,500 years. So this is a big departure from the Western intellectual tradition, which very much is based about understanding, and once you understand it, then you got it. You might subscribe to a particular philosophy, or you might have developed your own philosophy, but it's the thought that counts. It's that logical arriving at the getting your math right. And that's nothing to do with what we're doing in the Buddhist teaching, which is relinquishing all the conceptual constructs, the confusion and the delusion. And this is where on that journey, all of a sudden, all of the Vajrayana and the Vajrayana methods begins to speak so loudly and makes so much sense. But without actual experience, then it just won't be anything except just a burden and sort of an array of all sorts of confused methods and whatnot. So there is so of course it applies here what we often say, it's the teachings are a self-secret. Trungpa Rinpoche continues, I'm very happy that it has been possible to discuss the Vajrayana and the Vajrayogini tradition so genuinely and thoroughly. But the most important thing that one can ever do for others and for oneself and others is to sit down and unravel the confusion in one's mind. This is a very, very simple thing to do. And because it is so simple, it is also very easy not to see this possibility. So I don't think that needs a lot of unpacking. I think it's only too obvious to us if we humbly are aware of our fidgety, restless nature. And because we live in such a discourse that is so densely packed with ideas and meaning and propositions and fascinating conversations, it's very often that we overlook this immediacy of our own innate confusion and the immediacy of the possibility which is presented to us here that we could unravel that. So this is terribly close to home and as such also very often overlooked. Trungpa Rinpoche continues, it is my hope that this discussion will provide a glimpse of the Vajrayana world its grandeur, and its sacredness. Sacred possibilities always exist in our lives. The goodness and the gentleness of the world are always there for us to appreciate. This is not a myth, it is actual fact. We could experience Vajrayana at any time if we have the courage to acknowledge our own wakeful nature and the greatness of our heritage as human beings. So what we're proposing in the Vajrayana is not just the great absence of delusion, which of course is the foundation, but rather we, or in addition to propose delusion as, you could say, external to reality, that reality is not defined by delusion. Vajrayana also highlights and points out the qualities of enlightenment as it lives within our reality. And that's where reality and this nature of all the qualities of enlightenment, they abide as a dimension of the sacred. Of course, this is present everywhere within the Buddhist teaching in our celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. But particularly in Vajrayana, we have the yoga of integrating this vision within the applied and sustained methods that connect us to this sacredness, as we could do it with the practice of Vajrayana. And Vajrayana, again, never is introduced as some external deity, but is introduced to as this embodiment of our own wakeful nature. And this has nothing to do with method, has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with anything that we add to our nature. It's simply just acknowledging this, what Trungpa refers to, this heritage that we naturally possess. So Rinpoche then concludes, eternally brilliant, utterly empty, Vajra dancer, mother of all, I bow to you. The essence of all sentient beings lives as Vajrayana. From the milk ocean of her blessing, good butter is churned, which worthy ones receive as glory. May everyone eternally enjoy the lotus garden of the co-emergent mother. So we're fortunate to be privy to this, to be recipients of this, to live in a time where this insight is being shared, and that we actually have the way to not just externalize this as a phenomenal perspective, just like we were visiting the Grand Canyon, or I don't know, Katoomba in the Blue Mountains. then we have the fortune of being invited in. We're actually being invited into this lotus garden. So Trungpa wrote this very generously for this exhibit of Himalayan Buddhist art, which I think was called the Silk Road and the Diamond Path, or something like that. Okay. So there's plenty of time at this point. So so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So here, we are born with this freedom and then we unlearn it. Wouldn't it be amazing to learn to stay in that state from childhood on? Yeah, but the problem with the childhood is that we're not really, as children, we don't really have that quality of prajna. Of course, from our, and particularly within the Western psychological tradition, we look at children and see, oh, they're innocent. But yes, they're innocent for a lot of reasons. First of all, because they're, you could say, the motorical aspects of their brains are not fully developed. But not only that, it's also that there's still what we're interpreting as that beauty and innocence is not the primordial innocence. It's just another set of conditioning. And it's really, of course, we very often give the example of the child as innocence. And also we do this in the Buddhist tradition. You know, when we talk about the experience of Mahamudra, we would say it's just like a child marveling over the wonders of let's say, a temple. And sometimes we would talk about, for example, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about Padmasambhava's quality as being that innocent, primordial innocence. So innocence is definitely something that we can equate with enlightenment, and that's definitely the freedom that we possess. It's definitely that freedom that we have unlearned. But this goes beyond just, you could say, the developmental process of a human life. This is something that goes way back to the very origins of consciousness as we know it and that we experience it. So we have to go way back to the very ground of who we are, and that has nothing really to do with the developmental processes of this human life. It has to do with going back into the very moment actually that we are right now. So it's not as if something has ultimately gone wrong either, but it's very much in the context of what we have right now, that we have the fortune to be able to pursue that. This is not just something that has to do with sort of the biology of our being. But we should, and you're right, wouldn't it be amazing to learn to stay? That's what Trungpa Rinpoche also ends this on. May all beings enjoy this lotus garden of the co-emergent mother, for sure. So it's wonderful, very good to have that aspiration, and beautiful aspiration that we aspire that all might have this. So then there's a question. So is Mahamudra about recognizing our innate purity, our Buddha nature, and then maintaining that? Is that the practice? That is the practice of Mahamudra. That's right. Yeah. It is very subtle though. And to realize our innate purity and Buddha nature, we from the very start need to have trust in that nature. And that is, you could say, the foundations really of the entire Buddhist teaching, is that we're workable. We have suffering. The suffering is caused. This cause can be removed through the path, and as such, our condition is curable. So that from the very start, we need to have that trust in the goodness in ourselves and the goodness in others. And then working with what veils it gradually through the path, through the gradual path of accumulation, purification, and so forth, we then are gradually brought to the place where Mahamudra, in its actual experiential dimension, could be fully and properly introduced. Okay, thank you. Sorry if it's not our point now, but can you clarify the difference between the 6 realms and the Buddha fields? Okay, in one word, the difference between awareness and confusion. So the very nature of our being is this purity, and this purity produces display. Enlightenment wouldn't mean that we would go into a sort of like just then we're off, like the TV gets turned off and it sort of goes into that little dot in the middle and goes whoop. But rather it's where all of a sudden a veil gets taken away, and the very nature of our being is that it manifests, and when it's manifested within the, you could say, lack of the confusion, then it displays what we call Buddha fields. Then all of what we experience is pure. All the display, we call it Buddha fields, but it's not as if it's not as if it's some location somewhere. It's the absence of confusion with regards to the natural display. But when when there is confusion, then this display gets interpreted in terms of me in relation to the object, my struggle, my being, which is constituted by my body and my conscious experience, and then the display of the environment, our habitat, our realm. And so the difference between the 6 realms and Buddha fields lies in whether or not there is the filter of confusion. In the absence of confusion, then reality manifests as Buddha fields. In the presence of confusion, we have the 6 realms. Then there's a question. My question is, trying to be mindful and aware, I notice how many things happen at every moment of whatever I am doing. Say going up the stairs, you see the steps, your feet, you hear the sounds, etc. And trying to be mindful, you see how your mind is jumping between all the sights and sounds. It makes it sort of too busy, and it's quite tiring. So the question is how to be mindful in sort of a natural way without such kind of side effect. That's such a good question. Thank you for that. And what you're discussing here is, of course, the topic that we have in the Abhidharma, which is about the perceptions that we have on the basis of our faculty of, let's say you're going up the stairs, right? So you see you have the stairs there, which is the object, the field. Then you have the subjective perceiver, the conscious, well, basically you have the eyes, the organ, the faculty, right? And then on the meeting on basis of these two, that you have a set of eyes and you have the stairs, then you generate in your mind this notion stairs. And there you are, a sincere Buddhist practitioner wishing to be mindful at the same time. So there at the same time also, then and the thing is, it's not exactly at the same time, but then you're also hearing the creaking of the steps, right? And then you're thinking of what's upstairs, you know, and you're smelling the porridge that's cooking downstairs, etc. So you have continually all these perceptions, right? In fact, it's much worse than you think, because you're actually your cognitive capacity is incredibly sharp, but it just goes at one object at a time. And you're actually going through, you think that you're hearing and seeing at the same time, but you're actually going back between hearing and seeing. So they're actually not simultaneous events. They're like many, many multiple moments. And so actually to just be caught on the objects, that's right. That can be very tiring. And that's where we very often simply just relate to the simplicity of the footstep, the simplicity of the breath, and also sometimes just relax and let all these perceptions happen with really just settling into the cognizer rather than the object of mindfulness. So it's quite helpful to have an object of mindfulness, because that is essentially something non-conceptual. When you're attentive to your foot on the footsteps, you're not getting caught up in your sort of worries of various kinds of thoughts and so on. It actually is very much connecting us to reality. But at the same time, also to be sort of attentive, mindful of this, mindful of that, sort of that, it can get a bit tiring. So that's why it's okay to just relax into the perceiver. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. And I would also say, just relax, and you'll find your own way. There's a lot of advice to be given, but so often it's also about us just finding our own way. But certainly the insights that we have from the theory of Abhidharma and also from the instruction in meditation is very helpful in that process. Is Vajrayana a skillful means to attain Mahamudra, one that is at some point also relinquished? Well, Vajrayana is just using our conventional notion, deity is using our conventional notion of body, of speech, of mind. Basically, integrating all aspects of our being, also with mandala, integrating, you could say, the realm, that we're in. So Vajrayana and Vajrayana practice with any deity is an expression of Mahamudra. It's an expression of the innate absolute deity that is our Buddha nature. And the sadhanas are really just a way of continually coming back to the recognition of the purity of who we are and the purity of the world as it is. And as we engage in such a yoga, then initially we need to acknowledge we have a conceptual mind. So we need to have the conceptual reference point of our body and our speech. And to some extent also this awareness and mindfulness and awareness that we were just talking about. But eventually this as we sort of shed confusion, then yes, we go through more and more subtle yogas as we have it in the 4 empowerments. And that's where you could say the ultimate empowerment, Ati Yoga, is beyond any kind of method. And so obviously we talk about the path in terms of that ultimately the path, the vehicle needs to be abandoned. But even at the highest level, there's still this dimension of freedom from reference point is also introduced as a path. Okay, well now the questions are pouring in, so that's good. Hold on. So, and what is the relationship with our Buddha nature and the tendency for one of the 5 Buddha families, the connection that occurs with Yidam or wisdom, etc.? Well, our Buddha nature is not just blank, but it possesses qualities, and that is what the 5 Buddha families represent. That in all the various aspects of our being, and we talked about different moods and different environments and different flavors of our reality, enlightenment abides at all times, permeates all of that, and that's where it's very helpful to have the notion of Buddha family as an indicator for that, or rather as a description for how enlightenment can manifest in different ways within our being and within our experience. And this, and yes, integrating this understanding is where the practice of the Yidam is very helpful, because with the Yidam practice, we're continually connecting to this pure dimension, this dimension of our own purity and the purity of our reality altogether. And it is difficult to take this view of illusory appearances and emptiness and apply it continually during our daily living activities. It's easier to sustain the view during washing plates and cleaning, which are my individual me time, and I forget view immediately when interacting with others and working. Please comment how I can sustain the view. What's missing and what do I need to cultivate? Do I need to take like a 3 to 12 month retreat? You're right. It's what we need to do in terms of the view is first establish this as an understanding. You could say as a scientific understanding, just like we don't think about the world as being round, and we don't think about you could say the heliocentric universe. We don't think in terms of all the laws that govern reality, but we know it's there. You know, the way that we understand our world is something that underpins our attitudes and our actions. So that's where when we come back to, when we have a moment of coming back to reality, we come back to the view. And you're right, it is easier to sustain that view when doing something physical or manual. It's more difficult if we're sort of involved in all sorts of interactions and managing and interacting and, you know, decision making and responsibilities and worries and planning and whatnot. That's difficult at that time. The view needs to be there, but to sustain the view in action has always been the challenge, really, and that's why we promote the practice of meditation. Yes, the more we can practice meditation, the more we can integrate in our post-meditation. But of course, the point is In our modern world, there's so few facilities for this. We're so underdeveloped with regards to this project of enlightenment. And it's not as if it's getting better with the sort of the increasing speed and competitiveness that we experience in our world. And so, so this problem has always been there, and we're particularly challenged in this day and age. Of course, what we need to remember, given then you could say our choicelessness in the modern world, is that we can come back to it whenever we can remember, then we're there. So this is also a point that Tongsi Rinpoche so often is making with regards to meditation for the modern person, is that you cannot just rely on the practice of sitting on the cushion. You have to be able to do it when you're busy. But I completely agree with you, and I know for myself, it's certainly not easy when we're interacting and engaged and absorbed in our work. So it is difficult, but at the same time, we shouldn't relinquish hope of being able to integrate that. And we should also then, yes, try when we can to take time off to do retreat. That is important. It's just like for us to breathe, just like ordinary people have weekends, have 8-hour work days and so on nowadays. So we need to take out time to do meditation practice. Then there's a question here. Tsongsa Rinpoche insists on the need for us to see the paradox and equally value relative and absolute truth. But we have been taught we don't see things as they are. How value the impure view? Everything we want is realize absolute truth. That's not quite true. We're very much looking at relative truth. We're very much looking at our conditions, and the mere fact that we're engaging in the path, that we engage in meditation practice, that we engage in, you could say, an uplifted and proactive way of integrating the path in our everyday life, that is the way that we honor and value relative truth. So whenever we're engaging in the practice of the path, we're integrating this relative truth. And that's where relative truth actually leads us to absolute truth. So that's the skillful means of the path. The difference between sentient beings that are suffering and the freedom of enlightened beings is whether or not we have fully realized absolute truth, that we actually know the nature of reality, that we've actually seen that what appears to us as the snake, in fact, isn't a snake, it's a rope. So when there is this relief, that is the realization of absolute truth. The beautiful thing, and what Rinpoche is talking about, is that the Buddha taught how to integrate our immediate experience on the path, and that's integrating relative truth. What's particular about the Vajrayana is that we understand that relative truth and absolute truth have never gone two different ways, that within the relative truth, there is absolute truth. Within this consciousness and this experience of being, there is deity. Within the perceptions of the phenomenal world, there is mandala. So that's where we integrate the unity of relative truth and absolute truth. So yes, so this is where Rinpoche, he insists then on the nature of this paradox, that even though we are already perfectly enlightened, then we still operate within this confused condition. And so there is a paradox that we are enlightened and yet we're not. And that's where the whole experience of what we are, the relative truth presently, is something that we can bring to the path to realize absolute truth. So I hope that makes sense. So yes, everything we want is to realize absolute truth. That's what we're doing, but we're using relative truth as the method for that. Following on from the previous question about walking up the stairs, I am becoming more and more aware of the parts of our mind that I've created in childhood to protect myself and how they interact. And it is shocking watching how this strategy plays out. It is not inspiring that I have more awareness, it's overwhelming. And one of those parts is not on board with doing Dharma practice and relinquishing control to pure awareness. Yeah, that happens, and this of course is this is not just your experience. This is what we all very much go through, and we have developed so many different strategies and have developed so many patterns, and yet the lion's roar of the Buddha's teaching is this is workable. This is not we're not defined in terms of these, you could say, strategies, these reactive patterns. We're not defined by that. But it's not going to help for us to just have the theory. We need to actually come back to the practice of meditation to properly experience this. We've laid down patterns in the past. We're going to lay down patterns now too. The laying down of patterns is not over. And now we're going to replace previous patterns with new patterns. The impact of the past is of course there, and it lies on our what we call storehouse consciousness. And it plays out, but our perspective on these experiences and these seeds is taking place within the present moment. And that's where within the present moment we can shift our optics. We can lay down new habits of how to view these things. So it's very important that we practice meditation and not intellectualize, or that we don't fixate or regurgitate or essentially perpetuate narratives about what these past events do to us. This we do very often when we analyze things, and it's fine to analyze, but we also need to take into the analysis how these are essentially memories that we are constructing our present perceptions on the basis of. They're memories, and that's where in the practice of meditation we acknowledge that memories arise, but we don't perpetuate them. We don't feed them. We're connected with reality beyond past, present, and future. We're relating to the naked present reality. And that's a very provocative perspective, but that is in effect what we are doing with the practice of meditation. We understand the value of this approach through what we call the view, and we then integrate it on the basis of actual experience when we practice meditation. So we need to have these two, the view and then the practice of meditation. It's essential to meditate, and for us in the modern world, it's so difficult because we're so conditioned to be very attentive to our thinking, and we're very strongly inclined towards perpetuating these this analysis. And the practice of meditation is in no way contrary to analysis. It's not against analysis, but while we are practicing meditation, then we just focus on the meditation itself, and the meditation paves the way for discovery of a new way of interacting with our being, a new way of being with who we are, and also with what we've had in the past, and so on. We connect with a reality that's beyond just the ordinary projections that we have. So important to practice meditation, really, to get to the bottom of this, to begin to discover freedom from our psychological material and the memories and so on. Rinpoche mentioned once that if we come to the point where we notice the space between the thought, it is actually cognizance. But I experience such such a memory of some kind of dullness, even ignorance. Can you say a few words about it? Thank you. Well, this space between the thoughts is never going to be something that we can objectify. It's the lack. Again, it comes back to the practice and the experience, which has nothing to do with us fixating or analyzing or objectifying or thinking about it. In a translation by Trungpa Rinpoche of a great work by Jigme Lingpa called The Lion's Roar, he translates Jigme Lingpa's Tibetan as that which still notices what is happening. That which notices what's happening is still the tight grip of the ego. So experience as such doesn't actually come with the language, but it is nevertheless this space. And it's the recognition of this space that we can work with. But this really this is subtle, and that's where for us to right away get an understanding of it is not that easy. So that's where we need to be patient on the path and engage in the various aspects of the path. Yeah. Understanding Mahamudra, we understand Sokchen and Madhyamika. It is in the aspiration prayer of Mahamudra. Okay, I think you're right. Thank you. On the stairs example, is the acknowledge of the multiple dimensions perceived necessary for the other side, the resting though happen. Hold on. On the stairs example, is the acknowledge of the multiple dimensions perceived necessary for the other side, the resting though happen? Well, yeah, you can say yes. So these all being attentive to all these details of our perception takes us out of our heads. You know, when you're noticing the footstep on the stairs, the creaking, the hearing, the smelling, you're not lost in thought. You're actually connecting. So that actually is the doorway into connecting, and then also in that space of connecting outside of our ordinary, you know, being lost in thought, enables us to then find rest. But this mindfulness of various kinds, mindfulness of body, mindfulness of phenomena, etc., is very helpful for us to come to a place that is simply outside of the ordinary intellectual, and not just intellectual, it's the whole, you could say, aspect of the undertow of our narratives and our thinking, which again is what drives the attitudes, and then in extension of that, the emotions. So for us to cut through that whole process, coming back to mindfulness of the phenomena is very, very helpful. And it's in that, you can say, being out of our heads that we then have, that we can then settle. In a sense that, that there is something to rest from. Yeah, so that process brings about rest. Yeah, there's someone who's asking about Mahamudra as being substantialist. You know, that we're saying, oh, there's a Buddha nature. Is Buddha nature then like a god? And that's true. That's a very sophisticated debate that we have. But the thing is, we never objectify Buddha nature as something that is substantially existing. It's the very, in fact, the very absence of the substantially existence that makes Buddha nature what it is, namely this awake quality. If there's still a reference point, then it's still dualistic. If there's still a substance, there's something to be grasped onto, that would be the cause of suffering. Yeah. So, so Buddha nature is, it's synonymous with emptiness, and yet it's important that to understand that this emptiness is not just a blank, what we call non-affirmative negation, but it is endowed with what we call all the supreme aspects. And that's where all the qualities of Buddha nature, they arise, but not as something substantial, but as the natural display of awakening. Then there's a question here. All of corporate workplace is run based on 3 poisons. Not knowing the illusion of relative truth and not knowing the union of absolute reality. Yeah, this truth is here, like gravity is here. Yet people don't know it and don't seem to matter to people in samsara, not knowing they are in samsara. My question is, as a student of Buddha Dharma, how can I bring this truth to the workplace? And how can me knowing the truth of union of appearance and emptiness change my work, change how organizations are run? Like, so what of the truth to my work life? Well, you know, Songtse Rinpoche yesterday, he was talking about the noblest, almost the noblest of all virtue is really to wish to bring truth to the world. So your mere wish, this is what we call aspirational bodhicitta. That in itself has immense value. You're probably not going to be able to run this by the board, you know, to introduce the 2 truths and the path of the true accumulations and present the board the brilliant outcome of this will be, which will be the attainment of the 2 kayas. That's probably not likely to happen. But you being pregnant with this wish you're going to give birth to countless Buddhas. So just hang in there, and carrying that aspiration with you. This is also something that is connected with so many of the methods that we have. For example, Tonglen practice, you know, or I was just looking in the Avatamsaka Sutra. You know, every time we walk up stairs or we walk up a hill, may all beings go to the higher realms, and when we walk down the stairs, may I have no hesitation in descending into the realms of samsara in order to benefit sentient beings. So, you know, we can integrate all our experiences, you know, wherever we are, and particularly then, of course, in the workplace, aspiring that may all of these persons here meet with the Dharma and become free. Yeah, maybe try Tonglen practice. Yeah. Now, regarding perception and awareness, I have noticed I have preferences in my perception, visual preferences. Would it be useful to purposely attend to hearing or smell just to break up my personal patterns, preference for visual phenomena? Yeah, that's sure. If you're onto it, I mean, we all have particular natural, you could say, dispositions or preferences in some regard that we might be more or less conscious of. But if we are conscious of it, then sure, we could. And it probably is an interesting way of breaking. Anytime we break a pattern, we're doing something good. Yeah. Awareness of nowness is actually the Buddha. That's right. That's right. This is a quote from Buddha, yes, from his calling the Lama from afar. Yeah. Just wondering where thoughts come from at enlightened state. Well, we would actually say the Buddha doesn't have ordinary thoughts. We would say the Buddha possesses 2 kinds of wisdom. One is the wisdom that knows things as they are. And from there, the Buddha has no delusion. There's no dualistic phenomena. But then again, the Buddha would know things as they appear in the variety, meaning how sentient beings experience reality. Yeah? And there, the enlightened one benefits sentient beings in countless ways out of compassion. And we would say that then the Buddha manifests in this world, and the Buddha might appear according to our particular perceptions. The Buddha appears according to us. And there you would have your teacher sitting there wondering, I wonder if I should have the pizza with 4 seasons, or if I'm going to have the broccoli and spinach pizza. You know? And you would say, isn't he supposed to be the Buddha? Where isn't he having thoughts? That's of course the Buddha manifesting according to our particular disposition, our particular capacity, and you know, where we're at. But we would say in and of itself, the enlightened state is free from any concepts. And then every moment we are aware we are a Buddha. That's right. Yes, sounds good. Okay. All right. There's a few more minutes. Okay. Thank you very much. So, is it more noble aspiration to have the wish to help all my colleagues be enlightened and keep my work while trying to keep the view while working? Or is it more noble to renounce this samsaric wheel of work and dedicate my life fully to study and practice of Dharma? And once I'm enlightened, I'll be better equipped to help people. Assuming one has no family or monetary commitments and is free to choose, which pathway should be chosen? It's a tough one. You're asking me to give up your work and to pursue the Dharma instead. Well, yes, of course we would say that would be the more noble path. Yep, that is definitely, you could say, promoted in all of Buddhism. But just be aware that in the modern world, you don't have necessarily these institutions. You might have, you could say, the institutions of study and practice, but they're not supported in the way that they were just 100 years ago. So you would walk into a place where you would be where you have much less support than you have had before. So in the modern world, there's a lot of emphasis on integrating the teachings within our existing parameters, within our existing work and family life and everyday life as it plays out in the modern world. I think Buddhist teachers, and I'm not even a Buddhist teacher, I'm just here as sort of somebody studying this work together with you, but even great Buddhist teachers, they would be very careful about proposing their students to renounce everything. Of course, they would say, you know, it's a great thing to do, but also they'd be very wary to spell out very clearly all the, you could say, challenges that lie in that. And personally, I've seen many people who sort of on the spur of inspiration all of a sudden gave up everything, became monks and nuns, and experience a lot of difficulty with that. To some extent, it can work if you're in cultures in which Buddhism has already existed. But if you're living as a monk and nun, as a renunciant and monastic in the modern world, where you might, you know, like places like Europe or the US or Hong Kong or what have you, very difficult to find the support. So it's a difficult one. Yeah. Would you tell us what would be the next text we're going to read? I'm glad you asked. Okay, next time I'm going to be, and that's already starting next week, I'm going to be using this book here, which is a commentary of this book. And I'm going to be, this actually now it's called, what's it called again? The Bodhisattva Guide or something like that. I should know that, shouldn't I? Hold on, let me just find it, because you can get it now. It's this work, which is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary on the Bodhicharya Avatar. It's gone through a few incarnations, and so it was first called A Flash in the Lightning of the Dark, and then I think for some time it was called, I think, For the Benefit of Beings or something like that, and now it's called the Bodhisattva Guide. So I'll just show you. Let's see if I can. Okay, looks like this. This is how I have it in Kindle. But like I say, this was previously published like this one here, which is what I have. And then there was also a middle incarnation that had another name. Now this is something that has so much to do with our integrating our relative truth. because, of course, within the vision that we've been sharing here, the Vajrayana view of how the innate disposition abides and how it can be integrated, all of this has a lot to do with us, you could say, relinquishing our the cause of suffering, which are fixation on a self, and discovering this dimension of greater awakening. So this is where Vajrayana operates with this innate disposition and the yoga of our innate, you could say, recognition of Buddha nature. But we need at the same time to be skillfully supported in that practice through the bodhicitta and the courage that is not bound by our ordinary fixating on a self. So the entire project in the Mahayana of seeing through the delusion of self, fixating on a self, is so much consolidated through the what we call the skillful method of the paramitas, the paramita path. And the way of the Bodhisattva, the Bodhicharya Avatara, is such a wonderful work, and it comes with tremendous humor, comes with incredible insight and sharpness. Shantideva is someone who is just expert at sort of turning the tables on the ordinary habitual logic. So it's such a breath of fresh air to come across Shantideva's thoughts. And this is then, while there is a great commentary, there are a few great commentaries in translation. They're rather extensive, and to have the Dalai Lama's summary of this, I think, is really a tremendous boon for our practice. So that's what we're going to be looking at next time. So thank you for asking about that. Yeah. So coming up next, the way of the Bodhisattva as taught by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Okay. Thank you. Then someone says, I hope in the future we can have lectures about the bardos, but I'm very happy we'll study the Bodhicharya Avatara. Thank you for your knowledge. Yeah, okay. We actually did this in, there's a few wonderful works out there. We looked at something called, what was it, Pure Perception, some time ago, which speaks about the bardos. Thank you. Looking forward to next offering. Can't see you. What book? Okay, it's okay. If you go on, can you see this? If you go on Kindle, it's called the Bodhisattva Guide, and it's essentially just a commentary on the Bodhicharya Avatara. But yeah, like I said, it's had a few titles. Thank you all for thanking. Okay. Oh, thank you very much, everyone. You're all at this point, no questions, but just a lot of expressions of gratitude. And please remember, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if this is ringing true for you, it really is an indication that everything we're discussing here is part of you. So take your joy in rejoicing in what we've been studying here really as an expression of your own Buddha nature, and pursue this by means of practice. That's my aspiration to all of you. Okay, so thank you for your very generous comments here. Very, very kind of you. Okay, so so this was good. We could complete this study, and so so we'll dedicate the merit, and hopefully see you again, same place, same time next week. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, May we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Okay. Thank you.